The regular season is heating up, new stars are emerging, and that means more opportunities to win up to 25 times your cash on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection on a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's that easy. Let it fly to turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Watch your favorite players and get paid doing it this basketball season. See your entries make progress during the game or make new entries for the second half and the fourth quarter. 3-pointers, assists, rebounds, and everything in between are yours for the taking. Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
So our podcast is called Right and Wrong.
Are these your notes?
These
Are these your notes about what we're going to say?
Anything.
Nailed it.
It's a short answer.
So how many novels did you not finish?
Oh my God, so many.
It was perfect. What's she talking about? This is nonsense.
Ooh, a spicy question. I love it.
This is it, guys. The big secret to getting published is you have to write a good book. You heard it here first. Hello, and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, the winner of the Waterstones Children's Book Prize and Blue Peter Award in 2022. It's Hannah Gold. Hi, Hannah. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jamie. I always laugh at the introduction because it makes me sound like much more grandiose than I actually am. But yeah, great to be here.
Nonsense. You have a lot of critical acclaim and many awards and shortlists to your name.
It's been a good run. So yeah, it's been a good ride so far. So long may it continue. Yeah, it's been fantastic, indeed. Actually.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I know that you are very, very busy. Some people listening may have already seen this online, but you have just made a very exciting announcement.
I have, yeah. So we been sitting on this honestly about 18 months, but middle of start of January, we announced that I've got a sequel to The Last Bear coming out. So that comes
Amazing.
out end of September, which I'm really, really excited about. It's like, yeah, it was the book that I wanted to write next. When the publisher said, "Yeah, go for it," I was like, "Yeah, this is a nice thing to do."
So, The Last Bear, obviously your debut, very successful. When that came out, when you were writing that, was it always something you wanted to do a sequel, do a follow up?
I think so. So when I wrote The Last Bear, which was kind of backtracking, was 2019. I started writing it, and it was such a heartfelt project. And when I got to the end, for those of you who've read it, it's quite an emotional ending. Although, spoiler, no bears die. No bears die in this, but it's an emotional ending. And it felt like the ending almost kind of cried out for a follow-up. And also because I just loved writing the book so much. But when I spoke to my agent, when we were subbing it to publishers, and I said, do you think they'd want a series of this? She said, no, let's just pitch it as a standalone. And so we pitched 2 standalone books, which I then got the 2-book deal on. And it wasn't until really that The Last Bear started to come out and started to sort of gain a lot of traction. I was getting a lot of attention. And I had a lot of kids very, very early on saying, well, what happens to April and Bear? Are they going to see each other again? Or is there a sequel? That I proposed it to my publisher. I think it was mid-2020. So it was quite early on. The hardback had only been out a handful of months. And they were like, oh, yeah, that sounds good. And the conversation died down. And then I pitched, and then she said, I had another idea that I was talking about. And I started waffling on about that one on a phone call to my editor. And she said, about the sequel, though, to The Last Bear. I think you should do that one. And I got the go-ahead, and that was that.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't like a lot of back and forth between you and your agent and the editor and the publisher. It was kind of, it's been there for a while, and then someone just said, oh yeah, no, let's do that.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously the book had done, when you're in a position where your book has done really well, which I am, which is which is like the dream position to be in. And when it comes to sort of negotiating a new contract, I think that you hold much more of the sort of the trump cards in a way, because you're not having to go back and forth and pitching various ideas and will they take them, will they not take them. They were like, by the time that my contract came up for renewal, it was actually when we knew we had won the prizes. And so there was kind of almost like no way they were going to let me go. And at that point, I pitched, the sequel, and they were like incredibly on board and really, really excited and can see that it was such a good follow-up as a book 3. And that's when they gave me like a 3-book contract with Finding Bear as the first one of the 3-book contract.
Oh, okay. And will all 3 be follow on from The Bear?
The Bear.
The Bear.
One from The Bear.
The Bear is back.
No, I think, but I don't have book 5 in my head at the moment. Okay. But I've got the okay for book 4, but it's another standalone.
Okay. And of course, when we're talking about these novels, we need to talk about the amazing Levi Pinfold, who did the illustrations for The Last Bear and The Lost Whale.
And also for Finding Bear as well.
Okay, yeah. I was going to ask, no matter what, discussions or what you ended up doing, was he always going to be attached to whatever?
Yeah. It was actually funny because at that time, the editor who had acquired me for the first 2 books, and I was very, very close to her, but I think most of us listening, or maybe the authors amongst us, would have experienced that often people move on in publishing. And my editor moved on. So the one that said, I really want the sequel, she left HarperCollins. And it was just as my contract was being renewed. And it was a really sort of quite an emotive time where I felt a bit floundery. And HarperCollins are like, don't worry, and I was, we'll take care of you and it'll all be fine. And I was like, but she's going. And they kind of said, like, how can we make this right for you? And I said, but I can't do the sequel without Levi. And then she was sobbing like that. And they said, we will get him. And then I didn't start the book until I absolutely knew that he was locked down to do the sequel, because what is The Last Bear or Bear without Levi on board? So as soon as I know that he was locked in, it was like, right, I can start.
I guess there's comfort in sort of like you have a kind of team, and like one person, your editor left, so that was a part of your team losing. So it's nice to know that you still had Levi on board.
And actually, just losing the editor wasn't very nice, in terms of the publishing kind of perspective. But what it did do was bring me into the fold with all of the team, because quite often you have quite a myopic relationship with your editor, to the exclusion of the other members of this amazing publishing team. And what happened was I kind of got to meet the art director, I got to meet, the designer. I just was brought into the wider team. So on one, I think it actually worked out brilliantly. My new editor's amazing anyway. It was all fine. But with Levi is a slightly separate entity because he's not even based in the UK. He's based in Australia. And all of our communication sort of basically goes via the publisher anyway. But he is such an integral sort of part of the book. He's like, I can't imagine my books without him doing it. And I know much of the success in terms of the visuals is obviously how HarperCollins have packaged the books. But yeah, I mean, the cover for The Last Bear was just out of this, amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he completely outdid himself. The imagery is absolutely sensational. You mentioned that he's in Australia and it's less communication there. But what's the process sort of like working with an illustrator? Is it as simple as you send off the manuscript and then just kind of wait and see, or is there more of a back and forth?
It's a little bit more of a back and forth because I think it's the art designer. I might have got her name wrong, but there's somebody that you'd find this at all publishers. And what she does is she decides where in the book which parts of the book deserve or need an illustration. So she sets out. So she sends me a brief saying, like, page 67 when April feeds Bear peanut butter. I think we need an illustration there. And I kind of say, yeah, that's a really good thing. And I might say, look, I think we need another illustration because you've not got this. Like in the original book, there was an illustration where April and Bear are listening to the earth. And I thought, and that wasn't in the brief. And I said, I really want that because that's just integral to who I am as an author. That's the message of the books, So they put that in. And so then Levi then has that. So then he does his drafts, but his drafts are very, very kind of high standard anyway.
Yeah.
So I then see those drafts of the illustrations and I might say, yeah, look, well, Dad's missing his glasses in this shot, or, you're missing a chimney for this cabin, or, the whale with Lost Whale, it was very much about the tail. I kept saying, the fluke's wrong, yeah. And then he goes back and works in those corrections. But so it's back and forth, but it's not massively back and forth.
Okay. You obviously have some kind of input in it, but are you sort of slightly more periphery and it's more between him and the art directors and the team at Harper? Yeah,
definitely. I think, yeah. And I go back and I kind of, I give my input, but I trust him when I trust them. And I know that he's going to deliver to a really high standard. And we had a chat actually, me and Levi, just before Christmas, the first time we've actually spoken. We had a Zoom chat and that was great. And I talked to him about book 3, Finding Bear, and you could see his eyes lighting up and, working out, what the cover would be. But it is much more between them and I just provide feedback in a way, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess it takes some of the sort of worry off your plate. What was it like when you kind of first got Last Bear out and you first saw the sort of early kind of versions of what Levi had come up with for your story and characters?
Well, where the HarperCollins work is a bit weird actually, because they didn't give me any rough drafts of the cover.
Oh, okay.
They just presented it as this fait accompli. And so they're like, well, the cover's coming, and I knew it was going to be good, but I had no concept of really what to expect. And then I write, okay, here's the cover. We're on tenterhooks here. Do you like it? And obviously I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, it's amazing, And then because when you have the story in your mind and the characters are so personal to me, and then seeing him sort of breathe life into them, but also like the vastness of the landscapes that he's created as well. I was just like, oh my gosh, these are just amazing. Yeah, he never fails to blow me away. Yeah.
Well, that's good. I mean, there's nothing worse than I've heard the occasional story of an author, and obviously yours is fully illustrated, so it's different. But some authors get given sort of covers and they don't love them, and that's kind of heartbreaking when you've put so much into a book and it doesn't like match what you had in your head.
I think that is tough. I've had a few author friends in that position. You just have to sort of give out this public face of, oh, I love it. But privately, you're like, oh, I don't like it. But sometimes you have to trust the publisher, but sometimes the publisher does get it wrong as well. So it's always worth feeding back.
Yeah. What I would say is that the marketing team and a lot of the design teams at the publishers are much more in, like, their job is to literally know what is kind of grabbing people's eyes in bookshops, what is selling well in terms of like the visual of things. So I imagine that they usually know what they're doing.
Yeah, and they do market research as well, because sometimes if a cover maybe isn't working on the hardback, and let's say if you've got a hardback paperback, run, they'll kind of go back and do some market research and get some feedback. And often they work with booksellers as well, like key buyers, and sort of have a collaborative process with them too. So it's quite a lot that goes on behind the scenes for sure.
Yeah. It's a complicated beast, publishing is.
Yes.
Let's turn back the dial here and just rewind. I love to hear about people's writing origin stories. And am I right in thinking that you used to do screenwriting?
Yeah, I mean, that my profile is like really kind of like it says screenwriting. But, kind of the reality is, every profile is that when I was at uni, I studied screenwriting, and somehow that's kind of been like transposed into being some kind of screenwriter. But after I left, I did screenwriting at uni, and I always wanted to be a writer. Then after I left uni, I did work in the film industry for a little while. So I worked for like a couple of actors' agents. I worked for like a TV kind of production company, and I also worked for 2 or 3 theatre companies as well. So that was my sort of early 20s background.
Right.
Yeah.
At what point did you decide that you wanted to move into like literature, children's books?
I'd always wanted to be a children's author, but I suppose somewhere, I don't know how I went down the film route. And I had I'd written like a short film that got shortlisted for at that time there was a BBC 10 by 10 scheme, which I think it was 10 by 10 or 5 by 5. I can't remember. It's like a short film thing. I didn't go over the line and I was really gutted. But I think I always thought, well, I'm cutting my teeth in film and theatre. I'm learning. And I think for me, most of my journey has been about gathering the confidence and the worth to actually give my dream a go rather than holding it at arm's length. Right.
Okay. So obviously you'd written some screenplays and theatre stuff, bits and bobs. Had you written much in terms of like prose before Last Bear?
Not really, like a couple of short stories and nothing had ever happened. Like some non-fiction articles for travel magazines because I spent quite a long time living in Spain. But no real sort of attempt at a book. But in 2006, I'm sort of remembering parts of my story.
Yeah. Wait a second.
2006, I somehow got this writer in residence opportunity in this really gorgeous boutique hotel in Sydney, Australia. And at that point, I decided I was going to give my writing prose a go and write a YA book. And I don't know why I chose YA other than I thought maybe, it's an easy entry and it would be, at that time it was selling well.
Yeah. 2006, that checks out.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to give YA a go. And that book literally took about 6 years to write, but it was like what I call my sort of, learning curve. I mean, I remember sending a really early draft of that out to agents and they were like, not laughing. It was like, well, come back, in a few years, essentially.
Yeah.
I was clueless. I didn't know anything. But that began the journey of studying the market, studying publishers, studying which agents were out there. And then after 6 years, took a long time, I decided to write another YA book because nothing had happened with the first one other than, nothing really happened with the first one, but the second book I kind of wrote, which is another YA book, and I sent that off to agents. And with this book, I got a few, full manuscript requests.
Okay.
And I remember I got 4, and I remember thinking, you know what? One of these is going, what are the odds? One of these is going to yield in an agent. And then one by one, they all obviously turned around and said no, apart from one that never got back to me. And I do remember very, very clearly kind of literally sobbing on my husband's shoulder, just feeling absolutely devastated and feeling so deflated and thinking it's just, I've got so close, but it just felt like in that moment, it was never going to happen for me. I really, really remember that. And for about a year or two after that, I just couldn't write at all because I was just really kind of I'd taken it so personally and all of those things. And then I realized, after a year or two, well, why was I writing YA anyway? And my heart was, I never wanted to be a YA writer. I wanted to be a children's author. So that's when I thought, I'm going to give this another go, but I'm going to do the book I really want to do this time. And that's the children's book. And that book was The Last Bear.
Yes. And from what I've heard, that time around, your subbing to agents and then your agent to publisher was a total whirlwind. Did that happen in record time?
I think it was really quick. I don't know about record time, but I think the whole writing of the book and getting the agent. So I started writing the book, and the book was originally called Bear Island at that point. I started writing it in February. By the summer, it had finished. So I was subbing it out. I think I got a critique on it actually, and that took a bit of time because I was in a queue. So I think by beginning of September, I was subbing it actually, correction.
Yeah.
And then I started to get kind of the full manuscript requests quite quickly, but nobody really was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to sign you up within 48 hours of reading it. It wasn't that experience.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, but the agent I really wanted was Claire Wilson. And I'd sent it to her and I hadn't got any response whatsoever. And I'd seen on her website, that she was technically supposed to respond within 6 weeks. So I remember saying to an author friend of mine, look, Claire hasn't responded and it's been 8 weeks. do you think I should nudge her? And my friend said, best advice ever, definitely nudge her. So I nudged Claire on the Monday and I said something like, I'm starting to get a few full manuscript requests, but, basically you're my favourite. I'd really love you to read it if you've not already. And then on the Wednesday, she wrote back and she said, I love it. Send me the rest of the book. And on the Friday, she offered.
Okay.
And that was the end of November. So I'd started the book in February. And by the end of November, 9 months later, I had the agent. And then we did a couple of light edits over Christmas. And then we went on sub beginning of January. And I did get the deal very quickly.
Oh, okay. That was that part of it was quite quick. But the actual subbing to agents was it 9 months or something, did you say?
Yeah, no, 9 months of between first page and acquisition with the publisher was 11 months in total.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's quite good. And then I think I would have been out on sub from middle of September, beginning of September, to getting the agent end of November. So I feel like that's pretty standard, wasn't overnight.
There is no, I think for subbing to agents, there is no like standard. Some people sub and get picked up off their first sub. Some people sub for 2 years before they get picked up. It's all variable, but that's amazing. They got picked up so quick by a publisher, because you hear so many stories of manuscripts just dying on submission from the agent.
I know. I think Claire is like a super agent. She's absolutely one of the best, and she just had this reputation of like, if you get Claire Wilson, the publishers always put her subs top of the pile. And so I had this thing about her, and she's like, she's amazing. And so we went out on the sub, and I remember it was the second week of January, and the next day I got an offer. It was 24 hours later, which is incredible.
That's amazing.
I know. I was sitting on the sofa, and she goes, "We've got this offer in." That's the first one. But actually, in the end, it actually only turned out to be 2 offers. So again, if this offers any reassurance, I wasn't one of those books that had like 10 or 14 publishers all outbidding each other. Yeah. I had an auction. The first offer came in on the Tuesday, which was a preempt. I turned the preempt down, and then, which is quite brave, I think, in hindsight.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in the end, I met with 2 publishers. One of them dropped out last minute. I met with 2 publishers on the Thursday. And on the Friday, I think I chose HarperCollins. So a lot of publishers were interested, but they couldn't get it over the line with the acquisitions team. So
right.
Yeah.
Sure. So it was actually only a 2-way auction in the end.
It was, yeah. So I think in a way that's quite a lot. I think that's quite, what's the word? Hopefully that's inspiring or hopeful for others, because the success of the book, I think, even surprised HarperCollins. Yeah. And so if you look at how well the book has done in terms of awards and sales and things like that, there's a lot of publishers out there that when you make a deal, when you make an offer, you're basing it on how much money you think the book's going to make. And they, I think, made the wrong call, for many of them in terms of like getting it through the finance department. And so hopefully that shows that publishers don't always kind of get it right in terms of their sums and their predictions. Sometimes a book comes out and it does really well, and sometimes a book which is really backed comes out and it doesn't do that well.
Yeah. I mean, we are all just human beings. Everyone working at the publisher, all just human beings. We all make mistakes.
And that's not to say that my book's the most amazing book out there, because it isn't. I'm just saying like some people wouldn't have wanted it because they just weren't into it enough. But I think in a few cases it was a business decision. So yeah.
And there's these business decisions, especially from publishers. There's so many variables that go into these things, and it's the same with agents. I always say this: don't take your rejections. Try not to take them personally, because whether it's an agent or a publisher, they might really like it, but they can't take it because they have something that competes with that's coming out soon or already on their list, or it's like too similar to something else, and they just can't because of scheduling. There's so many different reasons other than them. It's
hating
not enough. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
It's not enough that they just like it a lot of the time.
No.
Sometimes it has to be the right time, the right place, the right person, all that.
Yeah, one of the publishers turned it down because there was an author on their kind of book, so they had invested in a long time. They're just too similar to me. And
Yeah,
I remember
exactly.
I've spoken to the editor since. She's going, you know, I really liked your book, you know, but we couldn't offer because of this other author that we had who's writing kind of similar things. And interestingly, one of the reasons that Claire, my agent, did offer was because she was specifically looking for a green type ecological book that wasn't dystopian. She was looking for my book. And so when my book landed, it was like, boom, okay, well, that's the book I was looking for. So, it's interesting.
Yeah, no, it is really interesting. I know you said that you didn't know why you started writing YA, but now that you're kind of very much in middle grade with your books, is there like an inkling in the back of your mind somewhere that you at some point may want to try a different age group?
Yeah, but I wouldn't go to YA again. I'm not edgy enough for YA. My books are unashamedly kind of quite sentimental and, you know, full of love and big feelings. And I don't think I'm not edgy and dark enough in a way. Not that all YA is like that. That's my perception of it, I admit. I would like to write picture books. I'm talking about that at the moment. And I'd like to do maybe a sort of a young chapter series. But yeah, I mean, children's books where my heartland is. So
yeah,
you never say never, but I don't see myself aging up at the moment or anytime soon.
Aging down, though.
Yeah,
for it.
yeah. And not because I think that's easier, but just because I think there's a lot of joy and a lot of learning in writing shorter books and sort of, you know, honing your craft and learning how to tell a story, but in fewer words. They're still keeping the thematics there.
Oh yeah, I think it's very difficult to write to high quality picture books. Because you have so few words.
Yeah, and I like books that's really spare. You know, my preference is like I like books which have white space metaphorically and literally on the page. I like the less is more adage, and so to do that in a picture book, I think is going to be like a real challenge. But yeah, a really good thing to do.
Yeah, I'm sure it's one of those things where you'll just, even if you tried to do it for a bit and didn't end up actually publishing a picture book, I'm sure you would learn so much just from the process of trying to figure that out that it would help, you know, your other writing.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. There's just so many kind of opportunities out there, and I feel lucky, you know, I feel in a really good position, and I know that my journey has been sort of not privileged, because I don't think when you say it's luck, you're not owning it. But I feel like I've got a good foundation below me, and I feel supported by the publisher. So I have the space and the confidence to try to branch out. But I don't know what I'm saying with this, but other than, you know, it's a great position to be in. And
I get it. I get it. So book 3 on the way. You've been doing this writing malarkey for a while now. Do you think the way that you plan and write your manuscripts now has changed a lot since when you first started?
I think one of the biggest things I've learned is like I don't need necessarily the big chunk of time that ideal writer Hannah would need. Because when I wrote Finding Bear, that's when my schedule was at its busiest. I was kind of, you know, going to the award ceremonies, which are great. But then I was having to do book tours, had lots of festivals and school visits and just lots of things. So I never had one chunk of time. And that worried me that I couldn't sort of cognitively just dip into and embrace my writing. But actually I did it. And then I realized, although it's ideal, I don't need one big chunk of 4 months blank schedule. I can write a book in pieces and it still be a good book. And so for me, that was a big sort of, learning curve about just showing up to the page, even when you're busy and on the move, even though it's not ideal. In terms of planning, I'm exactly the same as I've always been. I'm not a massive planner. I just immerse myself in the story feeling. And the characters and the settings and the themes. And I really like to live and breathe it before I start it. Kind of trust the team around me and my editor. I think book 3, I did try to make it sort of more pacey. Hopefully it's pacey. Not that the first 2 books aren't pacey, but I was much more aware of the commercial potential of it.
Sure.
So I think that's where I lean towards a little bit, just always thinking about having met a lot of my readers now and knowing what they like and what they don't like so much. It's becomes like this kind of two-way process where I'm tuning into them and thinking, okay, well, I'm still writing my story, but actually, yeah, I'm writing it for them too. And so you kind of, it just becomes this really nice relationship between author and reader, I think, when you finally get published and you've got, people who like your books. So I think I'm leaning towards being even more commercial, if I would say that.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. And Finding a Bear is out on the 28th of September?
Correct. It comes out in lovely hardback. Even though hardbacks supposedly never sell, because mine are they're just really beautiful and they give size. So hopefully people will kind of I know that money's really tight, and so you never take it for granted. And, the paperback will come out as well, and that will still be really beautiful. But it comes out in hardback 28th of December. And as 28th of September, sorry. Yeah. And as we speak, I know we're recording this kind of in January, the paperback version of The Lost Whale comes out beginning of February.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
So lots to look forward to.
Yeah.
And that, I think, brings us to the final question, which, as always, is, Hannah, if you were stranded on a desert island with a single book, which book would you take with you?
Well, this is quite easy for me because I would take Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And the reason being, when we say desert island, I imagine it's warm. So it's got to be, I always like to read a book which fits the surroundings. And that's obviously set in Colombia. And it's kind of I really was inspired by South American literature when I was in my 20s and the whole magic realism. And for those people who have read my book, particularly in The Last Bear, there's a real sort of sleight of hand going on between what parts of the book are real that you can actually, a girl on a desert, on an island, and then what parts of the book are magical. And it happens so gradually that you never really notice, actually, well, she shouldn't be riding a polar bear feeding him peanut butter, but you take it and you believe it. So I really loved that. And there's something about that book which is just, again, it's so unashamedly sentimental to the point where he's making a parody of it almost, of the way that they end up in this kind of going down a river into a sunset on a boat. So I love the writing. I love the emotions of it. I love kind of the magic realism of it. And there's a scene in it which always struck me because, have you read the book?
I've not, no.
Well, okay. Well, it's quite dense, but there's a scene where it's about this guy that's in love with this woman all his life, and it's almost like an unrequited love. And one day he goes to the restaurant, and she's in the same restaurant, and you can see her reflection in the mirror. And he never talks to her, he never lets her know that he loves her, but he takes that mirror, he buys the mirror from the restaurant, and he keeps it in his house because, you can still see the image of her reflection in it. And it's a bit weird, but I really like it. I just love books with big emotions and love. I mean, The Last Bear is basically one big love story, essentially, but in middle grade. And so a book about love, I could dip in and out of that a long time,
And love is something that you're going to want if you're stranded by yourself on an island.
Yeah, and it just reminds you, it's just the feelings based. And so, and the writing, the quality of the writing I admire as well, so.
Okay, amazing. Well, it sounds like a wonderful book. I will definitely add it to my to be read list. Thank you so much, Hannah, for coming on the show and sharing all of your experience and telling us all about what it's been like for you putting these books out into the world. It's been really great chatting.
No, thank you, Jamie, for having me. It's always it's nice to talk about your experiences. When I was sort of an aspiring author, I remember listening to lots of podcasts like this and sort of thinking, would it be me one day? Would I be able to do it? And like I said earlier on, my biggest thing was the confidence and the self-belief. And so if anybody is watching, I'm literally just, it's like I'm just a regular normal person sitting in my tracksuit top with a hair tied back. If it can happen to me, and I've not reached any kind of great pinnacle, I've just happened to win a couple of awards, but I'm over the line. If it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone, is what I would say.
Yeah. That's a lovely sentiment. And for anyone listening, if you want to keep up with everything that Hannah is doing and all the books and news, that you can follow her on Facebook. You can find her on Twitter at @hgold_author, on Instagram at hannahgold_author, and on TikTok at hannahauthorgold. Also her website, www.hannahgold.world. To make sure you don't miss an episode of this podcast, you can follow the Right and Wrong podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And if you're after more writing and storytelling discussions, check out my other podcast with YA authors Noami Gibson and Melissa Welliver, The Chosen Ones and Other Tropes. Thanks again to Hannah for coming on, and thanks to everyone for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks for hanging around to the end. Now, let me tell you about Write Mentors Hub. A subscription to Write Mentors Hub gives you access to an online community where children's writers at any stage of their writing and publishing journeys can interact, share advice, offer support, develop craft, and advance their careers. From craft talks to TikTok strategies, a shoulder to cry on while querying agents, or marketing advice for your soon-to-be-published debut, there's something for everyone. Every day is a writing day for Hub members, with an ever-growing range of initiatives like critique groups, workshops, pitching events, writing sprints, Q&As, and many, many more. The Hub is constantly expanding, so go and check out the Write Mentor website for the full and up-to-date list of member-only benefits. You can get your first month completely free if you enter the coupon code Right and Wrong at the online checkout. That's WRITE, the and symbol, WRONG, at checkout for your first month free. So go join the Hub, Write Mentor's supportive community of storytellers, because writing can be lonely, but it doesn't need to be.